Dark Bleatings, everybody. Instead of being current and talking about a show like, I don't know, You, season 5 that's just come out, I've decided to go old school because I'm old and rank all of the villains and antagonists from the original show of The Walking Dead. So this list doesn't include anyone from spin-offs, or if they are in the spin-offs, it doesn't include anyone because of what they're doing in spin-offs. This is all purely main show based. I wrote an article about this maybe a year or two ago, and then recently I got to interview Jay Bonenzinger, who wrote some Walking Dead novels, and they were the governor's origin story kind of novels, and it just reminded me that I'd made this list before, and I thought maybe it would be a fun video. So if anyone still cares about The Walking Dead at all, you might enjoy this. This is going to contain major spoilers for characters and story beats and the main show and everything, so if you haven't seen it or you want to, like, don't watch this because I am going to ruin it all for you. So I've got a list of 16. We're going to go in reverse order from worst to best. I'm going to tell you now, I forgot to put Nick and Spencer on this list at all, which means they probably would have come last anyway. And there was that one episode that was basically based on the people under the stairs. I think Greg Nicotero directed that one, and I really liked it as a standalone episode, but I haven't included those because they're really not show villains. It felt like a Halloween episode. It was the episode when Connie is trapped in that house and the walls are moving and there are people in the walls and stuff. So I liked it as like a horror episode, but I haven't included them because they had no bearing on the show. My rankings are based on how well I enjoyed watching the characters. Also, if their involvement with our main group showed us anything significant about any characters, or if they had any sort of weighty bearing on the main storylines. So there's kind of a lot of reasons that I've placed these all where they are. I'm sure that some of them are going to be controversial, but let's just get into it. So in the last place at number 16, I've got Dawn from season 5. So she was the leader of the hospital people. So like Dawn and that hospital group, for some reason they inexplicably kidnapped Beth and then just held her hostage in this hospital. I think that they said that they had given her some medical attention and now she was indebted to them. She had to work it off. But Beth quickly realizes that you can never work off your debt in this place. They're never going to let you go. And she meets Noah there. And I suppose the purpose of this group was to bring Noah into the main group, because that's all that really happens at the end of this. The main group turns up, they realise Beth is there, they've got Carol back because this group has like helped Carol as well. And then Beth dies in a completely, totally, utterly, like one of the most bullshit ways to die on that ever happened on the show, where a trained policewoman accidentally misfires her gun into Beth's head and she's dead. I just thought that was so, it was so stupid. Like they couldn't have thought of any other better way. I mean, they had this whole empty elevator shaft that they could have dropped Beth down, or she could have just got bitten by a zombie or got stabbed in a fight or something, but no. And so Beth's death kind of brought in Noah, which no one really understood the point of, because he died like 2 episodes later, so that was completely pointless. So it just ended, I mean, the group just ended up being really pointless. I guess this did serve Maggie's character arc because she'd not long lost her dad and now her sister's gone, so all of her family like are gone. Like in the season 2 finale, she lost almost everyone. Then Herschel died and then she only had Beth left. But beyond grieving and being like a bit angry, this didn't really bring about like a really significant change in Maggie, if I remember. So it's just, and also you didn't need a bunch of new characters to do this. They could have killed Beth any old way if that was the point of it. So I just found them really pointless, unfortunately, and I was a bit sad that Dawn was so ineffectual as a leader when she was the first female antagonist that was brought in. So I was a bit bummed that she was so forgettable and crap. Number 15, I've got Pamela, Lance and the Commonwealth that were introduced in season 10. I really liked all of the actors and thought they were really good, but the reason I didn't like the Commonwealth as a sort of antagonistic force is because it felt too big. They went from relatively small settlements to this enormous city. Like I still didn't quite get the scope of it, even in the finale of the show. It just felt too big. And also, like, in the comic you can kind of get away with people looking a bit like stormtroopers, but it was so stupid when you saw it on your screen in the show. And also, Pamela and Lance were just crooked politicians, and that's just not really what I wanted in a show from The Walking Dead. It was much more interesting to me when we were dealing with small groups that didn't know if they could trust each other and things, and they very clearly, like, they clearly couldn't trust the Commonwealth, and we knew that going in. We could tell because of the political nature of it, and when can you ever trust politicians? So yeah, I just really thought that they were kind of like an irritation to me as I was watching. Like, I didn't enjoy scenes that took place in the Commonwealth. They brought Princess in and gave her this whole episode during a Commonwealth, and I just thought, what is the point of this in the last but one season? But anyway, in number 14 we've got Jadis and the Trash People from season 7, and I mean, they were fine, but I didn't really enjoy them, and I kind of found them irritating. And it wasn't because they lived in a trash heap, that was fine. And maybe some people might have thought that the battle zombies they were making were kind of silly, but also fine. But I could not get over that minimalist way of talking. It was so stupid because, like, if the point of that was to not draw attention to themselves, then whisper like the Whisperers. Why would you still talk at regular volume but just say less, like say fewer words? And also they were sort of duplicitous. The main group could sort of strike an agreement with them and then get backstabbed, but it wasn't like it was a surprise because they presented themselves as completely self-serving in the first place, so it wasn't really much of a twist when they stabbed the main group in the back. So I just wasn't like super interested. Like, they felt a bit too cartoony for me, even for a show based on a comic book. Number 13, I've got Gregory from season 6. So he was the leader of Hilltop originally, and the reason that I found him, I was really fascinated watching Gregory because he was one of those characters I just really liked to hate because he was just a slippery, slimy little worm. But he was in charge of the Hilltop settlement, so he was trying to keep his people alive and everything, but he was at the mercy of the Saviors, and realistically there wasn't really anything he could do. So he was cowardly and he was desperate, and desperate people sometimes make unpredictable decisions that make for interesting scenes and storylines. So I really enjoyed watching Gregory, and I didn't know, he was an antagonistic force to the main group because, he was the main character of his own group and his own story, so he didn't really care. He didn't care about the needs of the main group. He was trying to keep his own group going. And yeah, you kind of couldn't blame him, but also he was a weasel, so I just really enjoyed watching him. Number 12, we've got season 8 Eugene and his character arc. So Eugene was initially introduced with Abraham and Rosita, and he'd lied to them so that they'd look after him. He told them that he had a contact in Washington that could like cure the zombie disease and all this, so they were protecting him. And then they find out he's lying, and Abraham beats him to a pulp. And after that, he's just kind of like, he's been traveling with them for so long that they're not going to abandon him now. But he is supposed to be a friend, and for the whole time that he's with the main group, he's just a kicking post. And I know that when we first meet Eugene, he's a coward and he's a liar and also a creepy pervert, but I can't believe I just followed that with but. I don't give creepy pervert a pass, right? It's just that I just didn't like how he was the butt of everyone's joke. Like, no one had any respect for him. It was made clear to him several times that he was useless, that he was not really wanted. So I really enjoyed when he was taken into Negan's group, that he was afforded some respect and he was treated like a human being, and that could potentially make him a real threat to the group because he did have knowledge and expertise that were useful but that just hadn't really been utilized by the main group that Negan saw in him. And I just loved his character arc, because I thought that he was going full savior here, and then when all of the guns backfired and it turned out that he'd never cut his loyalty to the main group despite being treated so much better by Negan's group, I just thought that that was such a great way to show like the real strength of Eugene's character. Was that was the one thing he could really offer, was like just completely unabashed loyalty to his friends, even though they treated him like a kicking post. So I just really enjoyed that whole little arc. Number 11, this is a three-way joint place, and this is because of the impact on other characters they had. So I've got Mitch from season 4, who was the governor's bitch. He was that little soldier boy that was just like a little yappy dog. And the reason I put him here is because I loved to hate him for the few scenes that he was in, and also it gave us, he was sort of like posted as this enemy to Daryl in particular, and then we got like one of the first really cool Daryl moments when he tossed the grenade down the shaft of the tank, so that was cool. And then we've got Pete from season 5, who was Jesse's husband, and he was a horrible abusive asshole, but he was also Alexandria's only doctor, which made him invaluable. And the reason I've got him here is because I didn't really like to watch this guy, because that kind of character is very true to real life, and it's really unpleasant to watch. But because of Pete, we got to see how demented Rick was going, because Rick set his sights on Jessie and just didn't seem to care that she was married. And then the second he realised that Pete was an asshole, it was like he thought that gave him free rein to do whatever. So I really enjoyed like what this gave us in Rick's character. But head of this pack of 3, I've got Ed from season 1, who was Carol's horrible abusive husband. And the reason I didn't like watching Ed either, he was a really unpleasant character, but he was one of the more realistic villains of the show. Like, there are 1,000 million men like him, you know. But his presence on the show served to give us the impetus for Carol's character arc. And when she's first seen, she looks meek and timid, and she is meek and timid, but I think that everyone watching thought that she was weak. And I always see people say, I always hear people say that Carol started off as a really weak character and became strong, but I would argue that she was never weak. Like, women who live with men like that are not weak, they're strong as fuck because they are enduring so much terrible stuff on a daily basis, and not everybody can. And I'm not saying it's a badge of honor to endure it, I'm just saying that the way that their marriage was shown was very realistic for a really abusive relationship. She has a young daughter to worry about. There are 1,000 reasons why she couldn't have left Ed, even though a lot of people wouldn't understand this, and they would think, oh well, why didn't you just leave him? Well, there would be reasons, but Carol just got she got to shovel Ed's head in as well, which was really like cathartic experience for her. And then his death kind of had her like rising out of the ashes like a phoenix, like the beast that she always was, and now she's free to like show it and be herself. So I just thought that Ed was a really important character, despite his very limited screen time. Number 10, I've got Dwight from season 6. I think pretty much everybody really likes Dwight, because when he's first brought in, we kind of like him, and then he makes off with Daryl's jacket and his bike, and I know that we all really hated that. We wanted Daryl to have his bike and his jacket back. But then when you get to know Dwight a bit more, you realise that he might be a saviour and he might be a villain to the main group, but also he's in a hell of his own, because he hates Negan probably more than anybody, and everything he's doing is to try and keep him and his wife together and alive. So he's a really layered sort of grey character that makes him a problem for our main group, because he's got to do what he's got to do, but you also couldn't completely not be on his side either. So yeah, he was just he just offered a lot of angles for us to see things from, so I really enjoyed him. Number 9, I've got Joe and the Claimers from season 6. So Joe, for some reason, really reminded me of Whistler from Blade. But Joe and the Claimers were a really rough group that Daryl attached himself to, and they kind of just live on the road. And little does Daryl know that when he joins them, they're hunting Rick, Michonne and Carl. And So yeah, Daryl knows that they're tracking somebody, but he doesn't know who they're tracking, and so their inclusion in the show served to bring Daryl back to Rick, Michonne, and Carl, because we all wanted to see Daryl and Rick together again. Also, it was a real test of where Daryl's loyalties might lie, because these are the kind of guys where if he'd never met Rick, this is the kind of group he could have ended up being in with Merle. These were very Merle-like characters to me, and I just thought that I thought that that was done intentionally to sort of show us how much Daryl had changed. And also there were just some really, really great tense scenes with Joe and the Claimers, and like their honor code was really messed up and stuff, so I really enjoyed watching them. Number 8, the Wolves in season 5. This was kind of a close one about which way round I was going to put these, but I loved the way that the Wolves were brought in, because we were just occasionally seeing dead bodies or zombies, like massacred zombies with like W's carved into their heads, and we didn't know what it meant, and then all of a sudden Alexandria was just like under siege from this group, and they were like feral hyenas. They were really, really scary. They were like really, really viciously violent in a way that we hadn't really seen in the show before. And also we were reminded that Carol is a complete badass, because when she goes into Alexandria, she pretends that she's not very capable and that the group just kindly took her along for the ride because she could cook and bake, and she was kind of like motherly, you know, in case they needed a sleeper agent, and it was really clever. And then when the wolves burst in, Carol just goes out and like almost single-handedly starts wiping them all out, so it was just really fun to watch. Number 7, and this might be kind of a hot take because I know a lot of people really didn't like this group, but I've got Leah and the Reapers from season 11, and I thought it was such a shame that they weren't used more, because so we've got Leah is the woman that Daryl has a relationship with and nobody liked it, and then she disappears because her original group finds her, so she leaves. And then when, you know, they meet back up, she's with this group, and it turns out that they're the group that killed Maggie's entire second group, so they're a really big threat. And also there's this Pope character, and I thought that the religious zealot aspect would have been really interesting, because we hadn't really seen that in this show, and I did wonder what a really twisted religious person might do with a group of people in these kinds of circumstances. And also these are all, you know, soldiers, like military trained. I think they were Marines or something, so they've got this this sort of like unshakable brotherhood kind of thing, like loyalty going as well. And there were just some really great scenes with them. I thought that they were posed as a really sincere threat, and I just thought I was sad that they were kind of taken out so quickly after we met them. Number 6, this is a two-way tie again. So I've got Simon from season 6. Everybody loved to hate Simon because he was kind of like, he was an absolute dickbag, but he was like charming and funny and sassy, and everybody just loves that in a villain. He was kind of like Negan light, I would say. And when he got the idea that maybe he ought to lead the Saviors and he wanted to have a fight with Negan, that was just like the fight I never knew that I wanted to see. So he was just one of those villains that, like, one of those smiling assholes that would turn up and you just knew he was gonna like mess everything up for people, but I just loved to watch him. And then tied with him I've got Mill from season 1. So Mill's introduced in season 1 just for one episode, and then he's gone. Has to cut his hand off and escape from a roof because Rick's handcuffed him to a pipe, and then he comes back in season 3, much to everybody's delighted surprise. And the reason that, because Mill's a complete asshole as well. He's racist, he's misogynistic, he's a dick to Daryl, and he's just a generally unpleasant, horrible guy that you would never want to be around, especially if you're like a woman on your own. You'd never want to be around Mill. But when he and Daryl are first introduced, they're together, and it's like, it seems quite clear that even though like Merle is the more severe one of the two of them, but that Merle and Daryl are quite similar when we first meet them. And then because Merle is gone and Daryl is like left with the rest of the group, who objectively have got much better moral centers than Merle did, Daryl develops, and then by the time Merle comes back into the show, I think his purpose was to show how much Daryl had changed, and you know how capable Daryl was of like sincere loving relationships with everybody. And yeah, he's a much better man than he was before, and a much better man than Merle when he comes back. And it was like it was a huge loyalty test, and it turned out like Daryl couldn't really pick between the group and Merle, but how could you? But I just thought that we got such interesting stuff, and I did like that Merle did have a little redemptive arc there at the end. Everyone was sad to see him go a second time, so I loved him. So number 5, Alpha, Beta and the Whisperers that came in season 9. Their introduction was great because we'd seen a couple of like odd things with the zombies, like a few things have been noted. The way they were brought in, Jesus is just showing off having a fist fight with a bunch of zombies, and this is something he does often for fun. And then a zombie turns out to not be dead, and then that's the Whisperers, and that's how we find out that this whole horde, they're not a horde of zombies at all, they're a group of living people pretending to be zombies. And I just thought that was such like, because I'd read the comics, I wasn't sure it would work in the show. I thought I was worried it was going to come off as too silly, but I think that despite the fact that they're wearing sort of like carved off zombie faces, I think that they did quite a good job of making them very formidable and very creepy. And I thought that Alpha was a really good example of how you can show that the apocalypse has made someone quite insane, but in a way that's a bit less cartoonish than someone like Jadis. Number 4, we've got Gareth and the Terminus group from season 4. So I just remember my heart being in my mouth for this whole thing with Terminus, because I remember that the group was split up because they've all fled the prison, and it was the first time the group had like really been split up like this, and none of us liked it. It was horrible, and we all wanted them back together. And then when half the group get to Terminus and they see items Rick notices, like Daryl's poncho and Glenn's watch, etc., I really thought, oh my god, have they eaten someone? Because the show had just shown us only a few episodes before, even the episode before, that they weren't afraid to kill off main characters. So it was just scary. And a group of cannibals luring people in under the guise of like, oh, we have a safe haven for you, and actually they're just going to let you in and then barbecue you. It's just absolutely horrifying. And when the Terminus group stupidly tried to track our main group, that brought about a couple of character deaths and a really significant scene where I think it was the first time that they switched off the we don't kill the living kind of moral code, and they had to just hack these people to death. So it was very important stuff happened because of the Terminus gang, and that was one of my favourite storylines for the whole show. Number 3, I really struggled placing the next 2 in this order, but I went back and forth. But number 3, I've got the governor from season 3. So I think I love him equally to second and first place here, but I guess slightly less. So the governor was just a perfect villain, because I think he was like the real first villain that we got in the show, and he's introduced as this charismatic, smiling, sort of kind, welcoming leader who turns out to be an absolute psychopath, just a cold-blooded fake killer with puts on this front for his community. And I think that he thinks that he does everything for his town, but it's really to just be hailed as a great leader and to be loved, and it's really egocentric. But he is also very layered, because he's keeping his zombie daughter in a closet, for example. He can't let go, and he does have a heart somewhere, but it's just got really twisted over time. The whole storyline with Andrea, I know that people were going wild about Andrea, but she didn't know what we knew, if that makes sense. So I didn't understand why there was so much hate for Andrea just not automatically killing him, because from what she'd seen, she had no reason to think that there was anything amiss for quite a while. And then she tried and she was stopped. So yes, he was a villain that I absolutely loved to watch, and on his moments where he was extra unhinged, he was so unpredictable. Like when he turns around and just shoots a bunch of his own people down, I couldn't believe it. It was so interesting. He was such an interesting character, and I would have loved to have seen how a different character would have dealt with him. Number 2, from season 6, Negan and the Saviors. I think that these guys possibly had the best show introduction there's ever been. The introduction where the episode where we finally meet Negan is the season 6 finale, and I honestly felt sick and my heart was in my mouth and I was sweating watching this episode. So for at least a season we'd had people saying they were Negan, people identifying themselves as the Saviors, being a problem for all these communities, and Rick is deciding that he's going to solve this problem because they're taking a massive cut of everybody's resources and saying that like they're protecting them from zombies and stuff, but they're not really. Like if the communities don't cough up, then they just send zombies in there and cause them problems. So they're basically just stealing from all these communities to keep themselves going. And we never see Negan. We don't know who he is, and they really took their time building that up, that reveal. And then the episode where we finally get to meet him, it starts with Rick being quite cocky about like, oh, I'll tell Negan, oh, I want to talk to him, or whatever he says. And then slowly as the episode goes on, because they're trying to get Maggie to Hilltop because she needs a doctor, so we're on a ticking clock for Maggie here, and it's like all of the members of our main group basically are in this little truck, and they're just getting cut off on every road with a group of saviors meeting them, and they realize that they're being herded, and then they get herded into the woods and surrounded. And it was, oh my god, it was some of the best writing that's ever been on the show. And Negan himself, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, is just a goat. I love him in every role I've seen him in, but this is my favourite. They could not have been a more perfect casting for this character, although I heard and read that Matthew Lillard was second in line for this, and I would have been very interested to see how Matthew Lillard played this because I love him, but I can't imagine it. But Negan was just so charismatic and funny, genuinely funny. And it's just, isn't it weird how much of a pass we'll give an absolute villain if they're funny and or hot? And that takes us to number 1, my absolute favourite antagonist of the entire show, and it was Shane Walsh. Introduced in season 1, I thought that he was an amazing character, and I thought that all of the best dynamic character shift kind of stuff came out of scenes with Shane. He impacted everyone in the group, and so he on his own he was such an interesting character, and his predicament that we are introduced with is so heart-wrenching and understandable, and we're all rooting for him originally. So he's Rick's partner, they work together, so they're cops and he's kind of Rick's partner. He leaves Rick in the hospital, barricades him inside the room when the zombies hit, but there is no way that Rick should have survived, and there's no reason that Shane would have thought he would, even if he blocked him in. Like, he blocked him in so he wouldn't get eaten by zombies, but Rick was in a coma on a drip with no one there to look after him anymore, so it's very realistic to think that he would have just died when all of his fluids ran out and stuff. And then he forms a relationship with Laurie, Rick's wife, and genuinely loves her, and he starts taking Carl as a kind of like adopted son, and he's the leader of this group. And then along comes Rick, and he doesn't know how to feel about it, because on one hand, yay, my best friend isn't dead, but on the other hand, he now knows that that's the woman he loves is now gone. His new kid isn't his kid. He's got to have to step back from that, and everyone in the group is now taking orders from Rick, and he doesn't even agree with Rick's decision making, but Rick's just swanned in and literally taken everything from him, from Shane's perspective. And it was I loved the writing, was just chef's kiss. Like, they built up just the growing resentment and just heartache of this guy, and then it's a slow descent into villain, but it is definitely a descent into villain, and it was just so good, so delicious, and that's why Shane will always be my number 1 antagonist. I just thought the writing was absolutely outstanding. Okay, so that was me and my Walking Dead rant today. I guess you know, for years I've been saying, oh yeah, we're off the show and blah de blah blah blah, but obviously I still feel quite strongly about it, so I'd love to know your thoughts. Like, who would you put in your top and bottom rankings if you watched the show? Well, if I am assuming you've watched the show, because why would you have watched this video if not? But yeah, I'd love to know if you disagree strongly with any of my placements, who your favourite villains are, and you know, and why. Like, let's talk about it in the comments. As you can tell, I never have people to talk about this with, so well, that's a lie. I talk to my brother about it all the time. Anyway, I hope this was okay and it was a bit of a different video, but I'll be back tomorrow with some Silent Hill, and then on Saturday with something else that's bookish or horror related, and then on Sunday we have another author interview. Have a good week, please.